Alright boys, here we go. Tiger Run, Union, South Carolina, Mideast round 5. I'm on the road, Vet C with about 18 other people, and I got there last second because I had forgotten my air filter and had to have somebody run out and grab me one, which ended up with me being not in the best place, but it turned out pretty good for my start. The weather they were calling for was rain all day long. It really didn't start till after our race in the afternoon, and it about destroyed this track. Take off into the start. I finally get another good start. I did a bunch of tweaking with my bike and finally got it set up to where it feels like it's running really, really well. That's Chris Hannon in front of me. Me and him run first and second for about 3/4 of this first lap. He ran really well for this entire track. I made a bunch of mistakes in the first lap and ended up dropping back a bunch of positions. Ended up in 5th out of 18 in my final scoring. Me and him could do really well if I could stay off the ground, because we're about the same. We're pretty equal in speed, and it make for a good race if you have somebody to battle all the time. The beginning of this course wasn't bad. It was a little beat up for being early, but this was a new course, and you could tell that it had been kind of fresh cut because of the little routes that usually get chewed up were still there, and then some of the lines weren't super established, and it got kind of beat into where there were these big erosion bumps and big sections of exposed routes like this that they would eventually probably work around, but they didn't for our race. Roots are something I'm not uncomfortable riding. It's just something that you got to get used to. The thing I wasn't prepared for was the amount of mud that was going to be in this race. There were sections of this that were miles long, and I'm not joking. That you'll see here in a little bit, miles 2 to 4 were solid mud. So we're down into a downhill section here. Chris makes a little line mistake, and I get to cruise around him. This is how it went for the first 3/4 of this first lap, is that me and Chris went back and forth depending on who made the better line choice, which is why it seems like fun. See, I make a bad choice here and Chris blasts by me. I just was trying to avoid getting stuck like that other guy. And this is, like I said, first lap. To be stuck in a big mud pit like that is not a good sign for what the rest of the course is going to be like. And I had said before that this is a tighter course for Mideast, and it really is. This is more like an NCHSA course. It was a little shorter and it was tighter. There were still fast sections, but they weren't overwhelming, and they weren't most of the course. It was mostly tight, single track through trees, which was really, really great. I make a move on Chris here, get around him. The trail's really good through some of these sections, into this hill climb here where they actually ended up rerouting. We went to the left and then up, because where that guy was sitting, there was a route that ended up getting exposed, and it was causing a lot of problems for people. People were hitting and flipping over. Along with the roots and the mud, there was also rocks. They were like, grapefruit size, maybe a little bigger, rip-rap style rocks that were covered in grease and mud and would just throw you off if you weren't prepared for them. And I was running my rock tire, my Shinko 505, which is really a great all-around tire, but it was not a good tire for this race because of the amount of mud. And Chris had been running a new AT81, which I think made a difference with the traction and everything, because my tire was not set up for the mud. Being behind these two guys, I've been talking about trying to make better choices with my hotlines and just committing to getting past people. So I decided I'm going to put it in action here, get around outside, cut a little hotline, run through, and make up these two spots. And I don't think they weren't in my group, because me and Chris are still running 1 and 2. He's right behind me. I'm revving to try and get this guy to let me pass, and I slip on a root. Chris says something, yelling, running past me, and then I get up and just take off again. My bike will lay on its side and chug, so if I drop it like that, and as long as I can get the clutch pulled in before it dies, I can make up some time, so I didn't really lose that much with the drop. It just put me back behind Chris, and then we had to make it around these two slow riders. If the whole course would have been like this, it would have been incredible. This section was really fun. It had a lot of good flow. It was good single track. It didn't get too beat up even through, after all the bikes ran through it for 4 and 5 laps like we did. And this is the stuff that me and Chris tend to ride when we ride together. It's a lot of single track. It's something we're going to need to practice at riding the faster stuff. So like I said, mile markers 2 to mile markers 4 were just mud. 2 miles of mud. And this is the beginning. I'm sliding right there. That was just me about to plow into a tree, doing everything I could, panicking to stop. My front brake was locked and my front wheels turned sideways and I'm sliding. Still good trail, it looks okay, but it just deteriorates so quickly. And you'll see here in a second where we get into a section where we're trying to avoid rutty mud, real deep ruts in mud, and it's just everywhere. You can't get around it. And this is first lap, so how does the course get this beat up? It's got to be completely saturated by the first lap to be this like torn up already, and it's only the first half of the first lap. So this is going into lap 3, and you can see that it's already deteriorated. I was trying to navigate around it, trying to stay where the dry stuff was and not get into the roots and to the roots and ruts that are all over here. And there were lines everywhere, and this whole forest right here smelled like coolant from people sitting there spinning their bikes and boiling over. I told myself in lap 2 after coming through here, I said, do not stop moving. You know, whatever you do, don't stop moving. You can't just get stuck, because no matter how much energy you're wasting riding through the mud like this, you're wasting 10 times the amount of energy trying to drag your bike out of the mud. I get behind this guy because he seems to be making good line choices, and we're avoiding a bunch of people. You can see up in the trees right there that there's 2 or 3 guys that are just sitting stuck in the mud. Make it around him, keep moving forward, just bikes everywhere. It's just second, third lap, it was just like that. Every time you got to this section, there was just somebody sitting in the woods. And these ruts weren't shallow. They were not like you could just run through them and really make a lot of time up. They were peg or mid-engine deep in some spots. And then I heard that in the afternoon race that some of these ruts were seat deep. And I can imagine, I don't know how many laps the pros ran, but it couldn't have been very many because they almost canceled the afternoon race because of the rain. From that little bobble I had, and you can see us just fighting to get through all these people that are trying to stay out of the mud as much as anybody else could. It just got worse and worse too. So this was the best conditions that was going to be, and then we were struggling to get through it in the first lap. I make a move on Chris, get around him. He's still right behind me the whole time. The mud subsides for just a minute and lets you get a little more speed, but there's still all the greasy roots and rocks to deal with. And then it's not like you get much of a reprieve from the mud in that 2-mile section. It was just little bits where it was a little drier than the rest of the course. All the rest of it was just, plow through and hope that you don't get stuck, and make sure you don't get stuck, because that's what's going to kill you on this stuff. Trying to make sure this official knows I'm here because I don't want him to pull up in front of me. I don't think he drove into the single track section on that 4-wheeler, but I still didn't want him to just decide to turn in front of me without knowing I was there, because I've seen people get kind of wrecked from people leaving 4-wheelers or like riding them into the course they're sweeping like they should be, but I just want to make sure he knows I'm there. I'm trying to catch up to some traffic so I can make some moves and try and put some distance between me and Chris, because he's still right on my ass. And you'll see here I make a little bobble. It's the same thing, it's just you catch a little root that you don't expect to be there because of the fresh course, and it's not super beat in. You also can't see it because everything's the same color. These guys are moving really well. I'm trying to make some moves and get up into position, and then I just push a rut and hit a little root, and then there goes Chris going past me. And that was the last time I saw him in this race. He just took off, and I couldn't make up the time. I had one more get off after that, and it was kind of, not super bad, but I kind of got launched off the bike, and it was just because of the same thing. It was just pushing ruts a little harder than I should have been, and hitting roots you didn't expect. And after that, I didn't have any issues. It was just the first lap was kind of rough for me, and then Chris capitalized on it. didn't make his mistakes till later on, but I left him enough time to not get caught. This hill caused a little bit of issue. People were getting crossed on it, kind of either toppling over or I don't know exactly, just I guess not hitting it with enough speed. This is what the rest of the course really looked like. It was wider. I think they ran the four-wheelers on this section. There's spider roots everywhere, and you had to be just real particular about where you put your front wheel and keeping the power kind of consistent to make sure that you can make it past these roots. And I'll see a lot of guys who come into root sections like that where they're off camber, and there's two options you can do. You can either go for the top, you go aim high, and because you know you're going to slide down into the roots, or go low where there's a rut developed, and that way you can kind of not worry about the sliding part. It's just the two options, and I tend to go high if I can because it gives you options for the exit of the turn instead of hitting a larger root. This little creek caused a little bit of issue. There were people not really stuck, but I think it was just intimidating for a lot of people, so they would come through that section and stop right in front of it and not really attack it. They had cut a bunch of logs and stuck them in the creek to make sure you can make it through it, but you didn't really need it. You could kind of just, you know, loft your front wheel and get through it. Another good section of single track. Really like this course a lot for the single track portions of it, how tight it was. It's a really nice mix up from some of the faster stuff that we've been doing with the Mid-East group. And it was really somewhere I was comfortable riding, so it, even after the race with those significant sections of mud, it was overall a really good course. It was a lot of fun to ride. It had some interesting sections, and it had some good elevation change, hill climbs, and everybody stayed pretty close together. I just wish I had stayed on my feet for the first lap so I could have, you know, battled a little longer with Chris and everybody up front. Another hill climb with two lines. It was the outside line where you could skip the log, or the log line where you jumped it and then continued up the hill. Some of the downhills, I was noticing that on the wider stuff, everybody was kind of backing off on the downhills, and I would continue to accelerate. I'm learning that from riding with faster guys, is about how you handle a downhill, braking, and appropriate acceleration and stuff. This is me picking an interesting line, trying to get through a section of people, big group of guys, all mixed traffic, and then really fast into the last section of woods right before you get to go to scoring. And this was a quarter mile of switchbacks in this black loamy dirt, and it got, you know, 3 or 4 good lines that were established. And Josh was here. What he said is that watching this section was kind of interesting because you could see where people had practiced and what people were good at. So he said, when I came through, the turning, like hitting turns hard, was not something I was super comfortable with, and I don't race motocross and I don't hit berms like that usually. So he said you could tell, you know, I didn't do it. It was kind of tentative compared to some people that would just come in and, you know, slide sideways. He said compared to some people who would hit the turn really well but couldn't negotiate roots and ruts. So, like, I would come through a section and then just be able to hit the roots and ruts and not really worry about it, while other people would bobble or fall or something. And it's just an interesting section to have before scoring, because it was like almost like you could relax about how fast you'd been going, and it was a different pace from the woods, the actual woods, and it was kind of a relaxing section, even though it was a little higher speed compared to the woods. So this is the second to last turn coming up before you get to the scoring tent. And this guy behind me makes a little mistake. I go inside of him and then, you know, accelerate out. And you'll see up here in just a second, you hear him clip my rear wheel, and then the netting on the side falls over. And you look, and there he is. I hope he didn't get hurt. I don't know, I guess I pushed him wide and he just ran into the back of me. I'm just glad it didn't end up taking both of us out. But I really am. See, I don't want him to be hurt. This is coming through scoring. That was showing me in 4th place in the first lap. And then you came around the outside here where it was like a pit area and back into the woods. I'm leaving this section in because this is where the creek jump was, and I figure everybody wants to see it. Big rollers into the creek jump. It wasn't a bad jump. It was like a second-ish jump. You hit it and just bounce over. This guy's dumb. And that's it. Finished 5th out of 18th. Chris finished 3rd out of 18. It was really good. It was a lot of fun. The 2 miles of mud was a little rough, but that's racing, isn't it? See you guys later.